In this video, we're going to talk about factoring trinomials when the leading coefficient is not equal to 1. So our steps are pretty similar to what they've been before, with a little bit of a twist. First thing we're going to do is we're going to check for greatest common factor, and we're going to make sure the trinomial is written in standard form. Step 3, we're going to multiply a times c, and then we're going to find the factors of the product a times c. Now we're going to determine which of these factors add to b. And we're going to rewrite the expression with the factors replacing b and factor it by grouping. So again, this is a little bit more confusing until you see it played out. So we're going to look at a couple of examples. So my first example is 3x squared plus 16x plus 5. I do not have a greatest common factor, and my trinomial is written in standard form. So I'm going to multiply a times c. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 5. And that gives me 15. So then I'm going to list the factors of 15. So I have 1 and 15. I have 3 and 5. I have negative 1 and negative 15. And I have negative 3 and negative 5. So those are my factors of 15. All right, so I'm going to determine which of these add up to be b. And b is the middle term. So 1 plus 15 is 16. That's what I'm looking for. So the factor pair I'm going to use is that one right here. So I'm going to rewrite this with 1x and 15x replacing my 16x in the middle. So when I rewrite this, it's going to be 3x squared plus x plus 15x plus 5. So I've replaced my 16x with x plus 15x. And then I can factor by grouping. So I'm going to group together 3x squared plus x and 15x plus 5. My greatest common factor of 3x squared and x is 3. Is x. That was silly. That leaves me with 3x plus 1. And my greatest common factor of 15x plus 5 is 5. So I have 3x plus 1. And then I write my final answer. So my final answer is the product of the factor inside the parentheses, so 3x plus 1 times the two pieces on the outside, x plus 5. Done. All right, example 2, no greatest common factor here. But I need to multiply together a and c. So I'm multiplying 3 and negative 35. And this is where it starts to get a little bit difficult because your numbers start to get large. So 3 times negative 35 gives me 105. And it's negative. So I need the factors of negative 105, and they have to add to 8, negative 8. So this one should be divisible by 5. So I have negative 5 and positive 21. That's not going to work. I have positive 5 and negative 21. That's not going to work. Let's see. I have positive 7 and negative 15. If I add those two together, there it is. So if I rewrite this, factoring by grouping, I'm going to replace the negative 8x with a 7x and a minus 15x. So I have 3x squared plus 7x minus 15x minus 35. And then I'm going to group them. 3x squared plus 7x minus 15x plus 35. Tricky. I went ahead and factored out that minus sign. So if I were to distribute it, it would become minus 15x minus 35. Kind of a trick there. You've got to be careful of. All right, greatest common factor here is going to be x. So I have 3x plus 7 minus, the greatest common factor here is going to be 5. So I'm left with 3x plus 7. So my two factors, the factor inside the parentheses, 3x plus 7, and the factor outside, x minus 5. Right, example 3, 6x squared minus 7x minus 5. So I'm going to multiply 6 and minus 5, and I get negative 30. So I need my factors of negative 30 that add up to be negative 7. So factors of negative 30 are going to be 15 and negative 2. Those don't work. Negative 15 and 2. Those don't work. 10 and negative 3. Those don't work. Negative 10 and positive 3. Bingo. There it is. So I'm going to rewrite 6x squared minus 10x plus 3x minus 5. So again, replacing that middle term with these two. Factor by grouping, so I'm going to group 6x squared minus 10x plus 3x minus 5. Greatest common factor between those two is going to be 2x. So I'm left with 3x minus 5. Greatest common factor here, they don't have one, so I'm going to use 1. So my final answer, 3x minus 5 times 2x plus 1. All right, next example, I have 12x squared minus 9x minus 30. Right off the bat, I can see that 3 is a factor of all of those numbers. So I'm going to start by factoring out my greatest common factor of 3. So that gives me 3 times 4x squared minus 3x minus 10. And then I'm going to work on factoring the trinomial inside here. So I'm going to multiply together 4 times negative 10, and that's going to give me negative 40. So I need the factors of negative 40 that add up to be negative 3. I'm no longer using this polynomial up top. I'm done with it. So you may want to cross it out. I don't need to use it anymore once I've factored out the greatest common factor. So factors of 40. It's going to be negative 4 and positive 10. That doesn't work. Positive 4 and negative 10 also doesn't work. I have 5 and negative 8. And that's it. That adds up to be negative 3. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3 times 4x squared plus 5x minus 8x minus 10. And then I'm going to factor by grouping. So I have 3, and I'm going to use some brackets. 4x squared plus 5x. 2 minus signs, so I can use a minus. 8x plus 10. That's kind of like the one above it, where you want to factor out that minus sign when I have 2 negatives here. So this is going to give me 3.
Jason, Carly, please come to the front office. Jason,
Sorry about
Carly,
that.
please come to the front office.
All right, so we've got 3. And then I'm going to find my greatest common factor between those two. It's just going to be an x. So I'm left with 4x plus 5 minus, greatest common factor here is 2, 4x plus 5. So my final answer is going to be 3 times 4x plus 5 times x minus 2. All right, last example, I have 30x squared minus 46x plus 8. So if I look at these, I know I have a greatest common factor of 2. Everything's even. So may not be the greatest, but in this case, 2 happens to be the greatest. So I'm going to factor out the 2. So that gives me 15x squared minus 23x plus 4. And then I'm done with that trinomial. I don't need that one anymore. And I'm going to look for the factors of 15 times 4, which is 60. And they have to add up to be negative 23. So factors of 60 are going to be 12 and 5. And that doesn't work, so I would try negative 12 and negative 5. That doesn't work. So we're going to try 20 and 3, not quite. Negative 20 and negative 3. There's my winner. Okay, negative 20 plus negative 3 gives me negative 23. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 times 15x squared minus 20x minus 3x plus 4. Alright, factor by grouping, so I have 2, and then in brackets I'm going to group together 15x squared minus 20x, and then I'm going to use a minus sign, and 3x minus 4. So you have to think about distributing. Minus a negative gives me a positive 4. So when I see this negative in front of my first term here, I want to make sure I bring down that subtraction and then adjust my constant accordingly. Alright, so I have 2. Greatest common factor of 15x squared and 20x is going to be 5x, which leaves me with 3x minus 4, minus no greatest common factor, so I have 1, like that. Alright, so my final answer, I have 2 times 3x minus 4 times 5x minus 1.